Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Westferry Times. We really appreciate you joining us. Thank you for watching Westferry Times. I'm Emily, and today, well, we're taking a deep dive into something pretty significant, something that's really evolving. That's the growing international momentum behind the recognition of Palestine as a sovereign state. And to help us sort of unpack all of this, the history, the recent shifts, and, what it all might mean, we're very fortunate to have Dr. Adam Rahman with us today. He's a highly respected political analyst specializing in Middle Eastern affairs. It's really great to have you here.
Thanks. It's good to be here.
So to get us started, maybe you could paint a bit of a picture for us. That historical journey towards Palestinian statehood, what are some of the key moments?
Certainly, yeah, the aspiration for Palestinian state, it goes back quite a way. A really significant early point was back in 1948. During the thick of the Arab-Israeli conflict, the Palestinian National Council declared independence in Gaza City then.
Right, 1948.
But, as you can probably imagine, given the circumstances on the ground, it didn't immediately become a functioning sovereign state. The regional dynamics, internal challenges, it was all very complex.
Understandably.
Then, fast forward a bit to 1988, that was another pivotal moment. The Palestine Liberation Organization, the PLO, which has, historically been seen as the main representative body for Palestinians, they proclaimed the state of Palestine.
Okay, so a formal proclamation then.
Exactly. A symbolic step, but really important. And it gained some international traction, particularly when the UN General Assembly passed Resolution 43177.
43177. And what did that resolution say?
It basically acknowledged the Palestinian people's right to sovereignty over the territories occupied since 1967.
Okay, so acknowledgments, declarations. But it's interesting, isn't it? Despite all that, Palestine still doesn't have full UN membership. What's the blockage there?
That's the crucial part. While lots of individual countries do recognize Palestine getting full UN membership, that requires the approval of the Security Council.
Right, the Security Council.
And, well, within the Council, geopolitical interests, stances of the permanent members, they play a really significant role. It creates, let's say, a major hurdle.
A big hurdle, okay. So that UN-level situation has been a bit stuck, perhaps. But recently, as we mentioned, there have been some pretty big moves from individual countries. Can you tell us a bit more about this recent surge?
Absolutely. May 2024 was quite notable. We saw Spain, Norway, and Ireland jointly announce their recognition of the state of Palestine.
3 European countries together.
Yes, and that was a really interesting signal. It suggests maybe a shift in European perspectives on the whole issue. The stated aim seems to be bolstering the stalled efforts towards a two-state solution.
Right, that idea of Israel and an independent Palestine existing side by side.
Exactly, and also to address the longstanding conflicts and grievances.
And how did that move, that joint recognition, how did that influence other nations? Thinking particularly about, say, the UK.
Yeah, the UK's position has been, well, evolving is probably the right word. If you look back to 2014, the House of Commons actually held a vote, and it was in favor of recognizing Palestine, though that was non-binding.
Non-binding, okay.
More recently, January of this year, 2024, the Foreign Secretary, David Cameron, he indicated the UK might formally recognize Palestine.
Might.
Yes, but crucially, he linked it to the context of peace negotiations.
So tied to the peace process.
It seems so. The willingness might be there, but the timing and the conditions, those seem to be key factors for the UK's approach.
Okay, that makes sense. So we're seeing this trend, more international recognition. What are the potential effects, the implications, if this becomes more widespread?
Well, there are a few angles to consider. For the Palestinians, it could really empower their diplomatic efforts. More recognition gives more legitimacy, maybe a stronger position in future negotiations, could lead to talks feeling perhaps more balanced.
Balanced, okay.
It also arguably increases pressure on Israel to, engage seriously in dialogue towards a resolution.
And the downsides or potential complications?
Well, you have to consider the relationships between the countries recognizing Palestine and Israel itself. That could certainly put a strain on diplomatic ties, maybe even economic ones.
That leads to another point. Are there concerns about this kind of unilateral recognition, especially if it happens outside of a peace deal?
Yes, absolutely. That's a major counterargument you hear. The view is often that recognition should really be part of a comprehensive peace agreement.
Why is that?
The concern is that recognizing a state without sorting out the fundamental issues like borders, security, how governance will work, issues that need mutual agreement, well, doing it unilaterally might not actually guarantee stability.
Right, it might not solve the core problems.
Exactly. Some argue it could even make finding a lasting solution more complicated, a sort of piecemeal approach that doesn't address the whole picture.
Okay, let's shift perspective a bit. How do Palestinians themselves on the ground tend to view these international recognition efforts?
For many Palestinians, these acts of recognition are seen as really important. A validation, you could say. Validation of their identity, their rights, especially the right to self-determination.
A sense of hope, maybe?
Yes, it definitely offers hope that maybe an end to the occupation, establishing their own state, could be closer.
Yeah.
But, it's also important to say there's skepticism too.
Understandably.
Yeah, given past disappointments. And the fact that these recognitions haven't so far led to really tangible changes in their day-to-day lives under occupation.
And flipping that again, what about the view from the Israeli government? How do they typically react to these unilateral recognitions?
Generally speaking, the Israeli government tends to view unilateral recognition as something that undermines direct negotiations.
Undermines them how?
The argument is often that these moves sort of prejudge the outcome of talks that should happen between the two sides directly. And there's also the concern voiced that it might embolden what they view as extremist factions, making the path to peace, which is already incredibly complex, even harder.
Okay, let's zoom out again slightly.
Hmm.
What role do the big international organizations play in all this? The UN, for example.
They're definitely central to the dynamic. The UN provides that key platform for dialogue, for resolutions. Even if General Assembly resolutions aren't always legally binding in the way Security Council ones are,
Right.
the GA's repeated acknowledgments of the right to Palestinian statehood, they carry significant diplomatic weight. They set a kind of standard.
And beyond the UN.
Well, you also have bodies like the International Criminal Court, the ICC. They can potentially address legal aspects of the conflict, which can sort of indirectly influence the conversation around statehood and accountability.
What about the European Union as a bloc? You mentioned Spain, Norway, Ireland acting, but what's the EU's overall stance? It seems a bit divided.
That's a very accurate way to put it. The EU has found itself somewhat divided on this. As we discussed, some member states are moving towards individual recognition now, but others within the EU prefer to keep a unified position, one that links recognition more directly to progress in actual peace negotiations.
So internal differences there.
Yes, it reflects the complex politics within the EU itself and the different historical ties and relationships various member states have with both Israel and the Palestinian Authority.
So looking ahead now, what do you see as the overall prospects? Palestinian statehood in the coming years. What's the outlook?
Look, the path forward is still undeniably challenging, really challenging. While this increasing international recognition is a significant development, you can't ignore the core issues.
The really tough ones.
Exactly. Borders, security arrangements, the refugee question, the status of Jerusalem. These are deeply complex issues. Resolving them will require really sustained, probably very difficult negotiations.
So international involvement remains key.
Absolutely. Continued international engagement, diplomatic pressure from, wide range of countries, that seems crucial to keep things moving, to keep dialogue alive.
And just finally, given the momentum we've talked about, do you think we'll see more countries following Spain, Norway, and Ireland's lead relatively soon?
It's certainly possible. You do sense a shift, perhaps, in global public sentiment. Especially, maybe, in light of recent conflicts and events. There seems to be growing sympathy for the Palestinian cause in many parts of the world.
Which could influence governments.
It could. It might create a political climate where more governments feel pressure or see an opportunity to consider recognition. But that said, every country's decision will ultimately be shaped by its own specific geopolitical alliances, its domestic politics. So, while it's possible, it's very hard to predict definitively who or when.
It's a situation we'll definitely need to keep watching closely. Dr. Aman, this has been incredibly insightful. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise and helping us navigate this really complex topic.
Thank you for having me. It was my pleasure.
And thank you, all of you, for joining us here on Westferry Times for this deep dive. We really encourage you to stay informed and keep engaging with this important and evolving issue. Until next time.